So, scene 4 begins with all three of the brothers, Peter, Simeon, and Abram, in the same locations as scene 2, in the interior of the kitchen with a lighted candle on the table. It's grey dawn outside. Simeon and Peter are just finishing their breakfast, and Abram sits before his plate of untouched food, brooding frowningly. Again, I think the contrast that William O'Neill establishes here between the intensity of their engagement and feeling is evident in these opening stage directions between Simeon and Peter and then Abe. You know, he's so sort of filled with this sort of bilious desire for revenge that he can't even eat his food. There's a beginning exchange between Peter, Simeon, and Abe, where they reflect on the fact that he looks glum, and they say sarcastically, sorrowing over his lust of the flesh, was she your first? And then Abram says, none of your business. So they attempt to think to sort of undermine his kind of passionate sexual nature in this opening because they identify, a sense of discrepancy between themselves and Abram. You know, he is ruled and governed by intense passion in a way that they are not. And I think that sort of ostracism of the protagonist through the question of desire is an interesting connection with Blanche in Streetcar, because ultimately, what we discover in Streetcar is that Blanche is just on the wrong side of history, and it's not actually the desire is what distinguishes her. It's precisely the desire that we see as being a universal facet of human existence and the human condition. Whereas in this play, it is this sort of passionate sexual intensity that distinguishes, I think, Abby and Abram from the other characters. I was thinking of him, I got a notion he's getting near. I can feel him coming on like you can feel malaria chill before it takes you. So there's this constant motif, I think, of Abram's connection to forces beyond his control, and this is what gives it this kind of tragic dimension and tragic texture, I think, as the play is aesthetic. This invocation of a kind of fatalism in his own bearing as an individual, but particularly in his relationship with Abby. Simeon then says, don't know, he'd like to catch his nap and just have something to hoss us around over. So we see through Simeon's lines here that they see, that Ephraim enjoys inflicting pain on them. And then Peter mechanically gets to his feet and Simeon does the same. So there's this sort of unthinking synchronicity between the two of them and adherence to a set of social norms. They get to work and then they plod mechanically toward the door before they realise, then they stop and shout. So they hear the fact that they are in this rhythmic kind of mechanical repetition of their labouring lifestyle is reflected in these stage directions, that they adhere to this kind of rhythmic, laborious repetition before they realise that Ephraim is not even on the farm and that there's no real reason to persist with the intensity of their manual labour. Further down, Simeon says, you cussed fool, Pete, and I be wuss. Let him see we ain't working, we don't give a damn. So this shows, I think, the intensity of their habits, that sort of Apollonian rigidity and the repetition of that labouring lifestyle that Ephraim has forced upon them. Further down, Peter then says, I'll serve to show him we're done with him. They sit down again and Abram stares from one to the other with surprise. So there's a sense, I think, of Abram's sort of misunderstanding of them, because they have a kind of hostility to match his. They have a desire for rebellion, and all this contributes to is to undermine Ephraim's position, his weakness. Simeon says, we're aiming to start being lilies of the field, nary a toil, spin or lick or work do we put in. So again, I think what we see there is the way that they frame themselves through these kind of natural images, I think, shows us an interesting conflict between Simeon and Peter and Abram. Abram uses this natural language to invoke the feminine, whereas Simeon and Peter are repeatedly using naturalistic images, these pieces of figurative language to invoke their own sort of lost vital connection to the natural world. And here, which is what they seem to be doing, they're sort of seeking the vitality of nature through a relinquishing or giving up of that intense manual labour. Simeon says, you're the soul hand until he comes, that's what you wanted. Well, we got to be soul hand too. The cows are better and you better hustle at the milking with excited joy. So here, Aben's desire for revenge is particularly evident in their in the excitement that he seizes upon the opportunity to get them to sign the paper. And Simeon peremptorily in response says, you better get to work. And he with queer excitement says, it's Mars farm again, it's my farm, them's my cows, I'll knock my darn fingers off the cows of mine. So again, there's this conflicted combination, I think, of the intensity of his passion and his vital connection with the maternal, but also his covetous kind of materialism and greed, which is strikingly evident in these lines here, that he was willing to milk his own fingers off for something that is his own. So his possessive nature is particularly evident here in a way that, again, he continually misunderstands. His internal conflict represents his failure, I think, to reconcile between the impulses of his father and his mother. And then they reflect on him after he leaves. And this kind of entrance and exit, I think, is important in constructing this sense of the irony of Aben's lack of self-awareness, because Simeon says, like his pa, and Simeon invokes this dog-eat-dog animalization of human society and their connection between each other. So he comes out the front door in the corner house. The sky is beginning to grow flushed with sunrise. So there's sort of escalating passion. You know, the sky itself, this sight of tranquility, at least in the opening, this moment of calm before the storm that we see in the exposition of the play, begins to kind of flush with intensity. He stops by the gate and stares around him with glowing, possessive eyes, and he takes the whole farm with his embracing glance of desire. So we see this enormous sense of conflict, I think, in his stage directions here, where there's this combination of material desire with both passion and emotional intensity that, again, establishes that internal conflict in his character. He says, it's Purdy, it's damn Purdy, and it's mine. And again, that combination of features, I think, is deliberately invoked here. He suddenly throws his head back and glares with hard, defiant eyes at the sky. So again, I think the defiance towards the sky shows us that he's kind of relinquishing that sense of reconciliation and tranquility, and that he's, in some respects, immersing himself in this sense of conflict. And then he says, it's mine, do you hear, mine? So this, I think, is a direct act of kind of a confrontational kind of clarion call, that he's giving up on the idea of tranquility and reconciliation, and that he's moving towards a conscious sort of identification of himself with conflict. Simeon then puts his muddy boots up on the table, and I think this is a sign of change, that, you know, he seems to be unimpeded for once, and their resistance to the repressive style of parenting of Ephraim is particularly evident in these following lines. A solid comfort for once, and then Peter says, aye, and he follows suit, and then unconsciously they both sigh. So again, this sort of unconscious connection between these two brothers, the sense in which they are both of the same constitution in terms of their identity, is invoked. And then they deliberately talk about Aben. He never was much a hand at milking, Aben won't. And then with a snort, his hands are like hoofs. And so there's a huge sense of irony here, that at the moment in which they criticise Aben's kind of lack of ability, they themselves are animalised. You know, they criticise his lack of skill, his sort of dexterity as a manual labour, but then they themselves snort. And so themselves, they sound like farm animals. And it's again part of that kind of primitive representation of both of their characters. Importantly, though, their association with animals and the natural world, I think, shows us part of the reason what, you know, the rationale for their rebellion here. You know, that they have been kept in sort of Apollonian repression by Ephraim, and here we see a kind of a resistance to that particular way of life. Now, they speak about their rebellion further down. They talk about gold in California and the luck to find it. They drink, puff resolutely, sigh, take their feet down from the table. Peter says liquor don't appear to set right, is what he means by this. So I think there's this sort of lack of conviction in their rebellion, because they're not driven, I think, by the same sort of vitality and life force and passion that Abram is driven by. You know, they are able to reconcile themselves to a sort of connection with the land through their sort of physicality and their manual labour, but actually their rebellion is formed actually from an active opposition of this particular feature of life, you know, of a willingness to resist the connection with the natural that has been forced upon them by the Apollonian rigidity of Ephraim. Simeon says, we ain't used to this so early, and there's a pause and they become very restless. They're kind of disturbed, I think, by their own disobedience at this moment in time. It shows us their inability, I think, to be independent and to think freely from the shackles of Ephraim. And then, with immense relief, he says, let's get a breath of air. Their rebellion is unnatural, and they feel like they need to be outside. You know, they can't. They are so established in their connection with the natural world through their manual labour that there's no way that they can accustomize themselves to this kind of comfortable existence. And then that, I think, sheds an enormous sort of indirect irony on their materialism. You know, the materialism that they constantly cling on to, the sort of covetousness of acquiring gold in the gold rush, would effectively allow this type of indolent lifestyle that they very briefly experiment with here and find to be completely unsatisfactory. It's satisfying them. So what we see is this kind of this great irony that we see that they wouldn't be happy in the lifestyle that they kind of lust after. They go outside. They appear on the house and stop by the gate and stare at the sky with a numbed appreciation. So there's this sort of automatic connection with the sky and the fact that they belong in the outdoors. So there's no real plausible connection with these characters and the indoors and staying away from the natural world. They've kind of been meshed to nature by their lifestyle and their forceful adherence to this. Simeon and Peter then talk about the gold in the east. Sun's starting with us for the golden west. So there's this, I think, this vision of money as innate and natural, and I think that conflict of vision is just like Abram's. You know, they don't really realise that material gain and a connection with natural vitality in this place seems to be sort of mutually exclusive, and that they are connected to both of those things. You know, their vision is to see gold in the sky. You know, their vision is conflicted. Simeon then stares around the farm with his compressed face tightened, unable to conceal his emotion. So he seems to be a kind of unfurling of anger here, which follows in the lines below. He stamps his foot on the earth and addresses it desperately. Wow, you've gone 30 years buried in you, spread out over you, blood and bone and sweat rotted away, fertilising you, enriching your soul, prime manure, by God, that's what I've been to. So this aggressive outpouring of emotion, I think, shows the way that his father has treated them as kind of fertiliser for the land, that actually their vitality has been lost in the soil. You know, that sort of Dionysian vitality that we see invoked in Abram through his passionate behaviour has basically been lost, and there's no way really of re-invoking and reinstating that vitality once it's gone. It's being channeled into the soil. It's being lost through the Apollonian rigidity of the lifestyle that Ephraim has enforced upon them. Simeon then joins in with this and then spits, and this is a constant sense, I think, of disgust and disdain that's I think, a comparable motif to Blanche's bathing in Streetcar. You know, there's this sense in which they're almost trying to cleanse the farm of its own sort of moral taint by constantly spitting on it. But the disgust, obviously, unlike Blanche's, is levelled outside of themselves rather than at themselves. But you could read that in a way that shows their dissatisfaction with their own life. Peter then says, there's gold in the West and freedom maybe. We've been slaves to stone walls here. So this captures this sort of drama and conflict between the characters, the brothers and the father, that sense of rivalry between the two, because we've been slaves to stone walls, that particular image, that's that image that speaks to the stones as a symbol of rigidity and repression and limitation. Simeon defiantly says, we ain't nobody's slaves from this out, nor no thin slaves another. So here, their rebellion is framed as this kind of active resistance to subjugation and repression. And they talk about Eben, he's barely been gone for a second. And then they speak to each other about the work on the farm. I hope he's managing. Maybe we ought to help. Maybe the cows knows us and likes us. They don't know him much. And the houses and the horses and pigs and chickens, they don't know him much. They knows us like brothers and likes us. And we raised them to be first-rate number one price stock. So the great irony here is that this is the deepest connection that they experience with these animals. That this is where their human capacity for a vital connection has mistakenly been channeled into their manual labouring life, and that's why they have this kind of inability to connect with human beings, because it's only through their commitment to manual labouring and the animals as the kind of representatives of that we see this kind of faulty Dionysian that we've also seen in a frame, through his continual need to sit by the cows. It shows us the way in which that human capacity for connection can go wrong and be mischanneled. And if it's not functioning properly, it will result in the isolation of these individuals, and that's precisely what we see in these two characters. Now, Peter says, we ain't no more, and then dully, Simeon says, I was forgetting, and then resigned, well, let's go help Eben spell and get worked up. So there's this sort of, they immediately forget this rebellion that they're supposedly engaged in, and there's a sense of reluctance here. I think perhaps a lack of independent spirit in their character that shows us that they don't really know what else to do. They've been completely hamstrung and limited by this sort of forced adherence to this labouring lifestyle. He says, it suits me. Then they stare off down the left rear of the barn, where Eben appears from there, hurrying around them with his face excited, and he's breathless. Well, here they be, the old mule and the bride. I see them from the barn down below at the turn. So he's excited here. He's breathless with excitement at the potential conflict between himself and his father. There's a real sense of passionate relish, I think, going on at that moment in time.